Hey everyone, this is Andrew Nagel of Alkanine Designs, and we are back again to show you the next part of the start to finish complex pendant design. We're building the frame for this piece, and we're going to be building this out of Argentium silver. The reason I use Argentium silver for my frames is because it fuses to itself without the need for solder. We'll get into that when we start soldering this together. I had already kind of started drawing this out when I was doing some other frames, and then I realized I was supposed to show you all. So what I've done so far is just I've done the outline of the two main stones, being the amethyst and the opal stone, and then now I'm doing the outermost edges of the frame. What you'll notice about the frame and the reason why I use the gridded paper is so I can balance it out, making sure all of the points are aligned on either side of the center stone. Now I'm going to be drawing out the supports on each one. Sorry that it's blurring out there. I didn't realize that when I was recording this, but as you can see, we're just drawing some supports on each side. We're going to do some smaller ones on the side, and then there's going to be some main supports that run across the whole thing. But we're going to leave open the bottom part of the amethyst setting and the opal setting to allow light to pass through. So moving over to the solder station, the first thing we're going to do is take our Argentium wire, and I'm going to start at the bottom of the amethyst setting, and I'm going to start to bend the wire along the amethyst setting to form what is going to be the open part underneath the, not amethyst, sorry, the Super 7 cabochon. I just think amethyst because it's purple. Super 7 has 7 other minerals growing alongside, well, 6 other minerals growing alongside the amethyst. I forget what all of them are. I know it's quartz, I believe it's like lepidite, if I'm saying that right, and then some others. Pretty interesting material. We're going to run this along the entire edge of what will be our amethyst stone. And then we're going to solder that together. The soldering happens in a few different stages. I like to build the settings such as this and then solder them together and then build the outside. I don't like so much wobbly parts, and so I like, some stability in what I've already built, so that way when I build these larger frames, it's a bit more stable as I'm working with it. Making sure it's a little cool, and then I give it a few taps with the pliers just to make sure it's kind of like, re-solidified and stuff, and I'm not going to break it when I pull it, because sometimes when you solder it to, when you solder on top of these ceramic blocks, the wire seems to stick a little bit when you pull, and so I just give it a few taps just to make sure it's nice and solid, and then I'll be very careful and wiggle back and forth as I pull it. I don't know if the taps actually do anything, but maybe it's an OCD thing. Continuing along with the frame, we are going to take that bottom wire and bend it along the outer portion of our frame drawing. I always just do these pen drawings over the pencil drawings to show where I'm going to outline my frame and where I'm planning on doing connection points. I'm not necessarily going to add all of those supports in when I build this, but I just draw in as many as I think I'm going to need, and then I add them into what feels natural on the piece. I do add in some specific ones to make sure that I have tie-down points for my larger wires and some of the other, connecting points. Making sure that that Super 7 cabochon doesn't fall through that opening to the back. We want to make sure that some light runs through, but you want to just make sure that the stone also does not fall through the frame. Now we're going to build the opening for the opal stone. We're just going to start with the length of Argentium. I'm just going to curl it around the length of the opal with some pliers. It's pretty, it's the same process for making these openings. You just want that wire to run around the outside of your stone. If it's an octagon, then you'll do an octagon shape. If it's an oval, you'll do an oval shape like this. If it's circular, so on and so forth. So now we're going to attach this setting to our other setting in the center. I'm going to heat up the bottom part just a little bit to make sure it lays flat. I was having some issues with my little length of Argentium here kind of falling off to the side. It was getting really annoying, and I still have some issues with it, but I'm going to get it pretty aligned here. You can always make some minor adjustments since the top part is not attached yet. And I'm going to heat them together now and fuse that Argentium together. It's so convenient using the Argentium silver. You don't need flux, you don't need solder. It just fuses together because Argentium silver has trace amounts of germanium mixed into the metal, so that way it fuses to itself. Now when I pull these off of these honeycomb blocks, I dip them into a cup of water that is next to my soldering station. I hope some of you all have watched my other soldering tutorials that I've done in the other start to finish ones, and my just general soldering tutorials before you attempt doing this. And so now that we have a good portion of this built, we've got our right side of the frame built as well, we're going to connect the top part. And I liked where everything was sitting in the center, so it looked decently aligned. I flip it to the side. I'll look at it from different angles just to make sure that I'm not missing something. Continuing to bend that Argentium along our outline of the frame. We're going to then fold that length across the top bar there, and we'll take this back to the soldering block and connect it all together. Making sure again that everything's aligning real nicely. That's why I always draw out my designs first, so that way I know kind of what I'm doing and where I'm going with it, and that way I have a bit more of a finalized concept once I'm done with it. Back at the soldering block, we're going to fuse this all together. I'll leave a Rio item number in the description for the soldering block and the germanium wire as well. I use 18 gauge for all of my frames. 20 gauge is pretty decent too, but it's a little large, so 18 gauge seems to work the best for like mini pendants and also these larger ones as well. It's pretty stable once you hammer it down, and it's it works pretty well. It polishes up really nicely too. So I've clipped off that top bar, at least the excess part, and now I'm trying to finesse this little part it was kind of like S-curving on me there, and I need a straight bar here. And so straightening that out, this little top part, you have to be, some small pliers are really nice to work with in those little nooks and crannies. We're just going to be following basically the same pattern all the way back. Another good idea is to flip over the frame and follow the pattern along the other side that you've already done. That usually keeps them aligned very well, because that way you're following basically the same side and whatnot, and it just keeps it super even. You'll want to flip over the piece and look at it from the back, look at it from different angles, just to make sure that you're making the frame as even as possible. You're not a machine, so some imperfections is fine, but the better the frame, the better the final result. Coming around to the end here, and we're bending over the bottom part and going to connect those two. And it looks like our frame will be coming together very nicely at this point. I'm going to lengthen out this one bar just a little bit. I have a slight issue with kind of the shoulders there of the design, but other than that, the frame has been coming along nicely. Soldering it together, and now I'm going to take this over to my anvil and hammer it together and flatten it out. So now that it's flattened, we're going to add some of the supports. I'm going to add one of the longer ones at the bottom and then one off to the side here. You can definitely do multiple supports at once, but I wouldn't get too crazy with it because, you know, I've found that I add all of the supports, and then as you start heating it, you know, some of them shift and whatnot, and so it's easier to just solder a couple of them on there and then add the next few and add the next few until you're finally done. No need to rush it. Bringing that frame together. Soldering it all together. When you heat these, you want to make sure the heat is dispersed all over the piece. You don't want to leave any part like cool, and you don't want to focus in on one spot for too long, otherwise you might melt the wire. And so keep your flame moving across the piece, going up and down, and heating up the whole piece all together. So I thought I was going to do one bar across the top there, but I decided not to, like a bar in between the two open spaces, but I decided I didn't really need it. It was just a little much right there. Now we're going to fuse all of this together. Bringing the supports nice and fused together to make one nice solid piece. These supports are very important on making the piece stable. And so you don't want to, you know, put in too few. They also help with adding connection points for some of your other wires and supports for like channels and stuff like that. And so you want to make sure there's enough to have all the connection points you need and all the support you need, but you also don't want to overload it because then there's not going to be enough room to send your wires through, and there's not going to be enough space for you to, you know, work with the connection points and connecting the wires to the frame. I've made that mistake before where I've done too many supports, and it's just been an issue. So here we are over at the anvil. I'm just going to hammer that down real quick. Again, spread out the hammer and get the whole thing. Make it nice and flat. I like to flatten out those connection points. Hit it with the flame one more time, and then now I'm looking at it again after we've cooled it down, obviously, and yeah, it looks pretty decent so far. We're going to remove these edge points and then file it down. So you can always save your silver, as you can see in this giant tub I have here. It's not really giant. I've definitely had some scraps over the last year or so. I don't think I sent in silver at all last year. I'm not really sure. I can't remember. But there's a lot there. And my plan is to smelt it down in the future to make some cast designs. So that way I have some scrap silver just there ready to go to smelt down for that. We've removed all the points, saved them as well. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the cap for that just kind of flew off and it went across the room. I still have yet to find it. So I'm utilizing some files. I will leave a item number in the description as well. These are a great size for frames and some sheet metal shaping as well. I'm already going to have to get new ones because I've used them so much. With the frames, it's kind of nice to just go with one smooth motion over the edge and just to shape over that edge until it's nice and rounded, and so that way the connection points are no longer sharp where you've cut them off. We're going to do that to all of the different connection points along this frame. We're just using the flat side of one of the files. The set that I'm going to leave in the description has 6 different files, and it's got some thinner ones and some thicker ones. This is one of my favorites for shaping curves on sheet metal and for filing down the end points on the wire wrap frames. Now we're going to utilize one of the round files to take care of those little points on the inside of the opal setting. I'm going to also use the larger file once I've made enough space to kind of round out that little bottom part. Those three little points came together and made like a little prong there, and so just needed to file those out and reshape that bottom part a little bit. There's just a few more points on the inside of the amethyst part, and then we will be done with the filing down of this frame. Then we're going to move on to polishing the frame as well, using the flat edge to just get those final connection points off of the amethyst setting. Again, we're just going to do like kind of a single motion going forward. Some of them I just get aggressive with it and I'll go back and forth, but it's kind of best to go in a single motion forward and to create a single plane with the metal. It's easier to polish. If you scratch it up a lot going back and forth, then you have to work the scratches that you've gone, you know, in both directions instead of just the one direction. So what we're going to start with is the silicone wheel rough and then progress down the 3M bristle discs. We're going to use a variety of the different grits for the bristle discs. We're going to start with the silicone rough wheel. I will leave item numbers for all of these in the description of the video as well. So we're starting with that, and then we're going to be going to the 80 grit yellow 3M bristle disc. Then we're moving on to the 400 grit blue bristle disc. After that, we're going down to the pumice pink bristle disc. Then I'm going to the micron peach bristle disc after that, and then down to the 1 micron. Basically, the idea is that you start with a rough grit, and then you go up in microns. You go up in grits. The higher the grit, the higher the polish. I'm also throwing in the fine wheel before I get down to the 1 micron. I'll leave a link for a couple, like a variety pack of the wheels that you guys can get just to see if you enjoy them. So that was the building of the frame. And yeah, so with the polishing, you're just progressing in microns to a higher micron that, you know, leaves such tiny scratches that you cannot see them with the human eye. And so the 1 micron has such fine scratches that you cannot see the scratches, and so it leaves a nice shiny polish. The gemstones are sitting in there nicely, and I believe that finishes the frame. And so, yeah, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm releasing this a little bit early because I am going snowboarding this weekend, so I hope you all have a great weekend and go out there and enjoy some nature yourselves as well. Have a great weekend, everyone.